Sarah Finn is a special collections librarian at Milwaukee Public Library in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. She earned a MLIS with an archival concentration and a history MA from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. Finn is passionate about sharing the history of print with the wider public and curates the popular Instagram account at Romance of Books, which documents her extensive research into printed natural history illustrations. Welcome, Sarah. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, thank you, Blake. I'm incredibly honored to moderate this panel of incredible artists and courageous women. So it is my pleasure to introduce Desirée Aspiras, who is a therapist and educator whose work bridges creative, contemplative, and justice-centered approaches in mental health. She integrates mindful, creative, and socioculturally attuned modalities to support self-awareness, healing, and growth. In her teaching, she draws from contemplative and critical pedagogy to foster reflection, relational learning, and liberatory inquiry. Her creative practice includes letterpress, poetry, book arts, and collage. She is also an Acosta Institute Fellow and founder of Printmakers Against Racism and Deep Breath Press. Jenn Graves is a letterpress printer, book artist, and educator based in Los Angeles, California. She works within the tactile traditions of the book arts and print, exploring how material process and form can shape the stories we tell. Her printed works have been exhibited across the US and internationally, often inviting audiences into quiet conversation between craft and concept, intimacy and public voice. She teaches book projects at Otis College of Art and Design and leads bookmaking and letterpress workshops at places like the Printing Museum and through her own studio, Scraps Collective. At the heart of her practice is a belief that books are more than objects. They are experiences, carriers of memory, and tools for connection. Melissa Blount is an artist, letterpress printer, writer, and licensed clinical psychologist based in Evanston, Illinois. Her work explores Black womanhood, trauma, and white supremacy in America, often using antique household linens as canvases to reimagine narratives of domesticity and resilience. Through community sewing circles and public actions, she creates spaces where collective reflection and healing take root. A dedicated activist and cultural organizer, Melissa co-founded MEET, Meeting Evanston Making Evanston Equitable Together, Opal, Organization for Positive Action and Leadership, and Artist Bookhouse, working at the intersections of advocacy, politics, and the arts. She's also an experienced clinician and national lecturer on Black health, trauma, and the transformative possibilities of art for healing and community building. Welcome, Desiree, Jennifer, and Melissa. So my first question to get us started is, how did you all connect? When did you first meet and work together?
I think I'll go first. Uh, Jen and I don't exactly know the exact moment that we met, but uh, she was doing a talk during COVID for PIP, and she was I can't even remember who she was interviewing, but I was so excited to see her because I bought one of her prints, and I was just so excited to see the artist who had done the print, and I was just like, oh, I think we'll be friends. And so that kind of started it off. And then I can't, Jen, do you remember what happened next and how it came to be that I asked you to come to Ways Goose?
Yeah, so like Melissa said, she had bought a print and we just kept in touch through Instagram. This was during, the lockdown and everybody pretty much, met new people through Instagram during this time. And so we just kept in touch. And then somehow Ways Goose came up and I said, I'm on the fence about going. She's like, no. Melissa's like, no, you got to go to Ways Goose. You got to go. And I'm like, okay, well, if ABCD happens, then I'll go. ABCD happened. And so, and so I went. So that's how we ended up. That's when we met in person and at Ways Goose at Hamilton.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was more like I begged her to come because I was tired of being the only Black person primarily in the room besides Ben and Rick Griffith was there at the time. But, you could count the number of folks of color on one hand primarily. So I was like, please, please come. And
Yeah.
so she did.
Yeah. But the thing with the print that Melissa bought is actually a campaign that Desiree was running, Printmakers Against Racism, and there was a call for prints for I can't even, there were a
There
few,
were there were quite a few.
quite a few. And so the print that Melissa bought was actually from the campaign that Desiree was running. So it's really interesting how we're connected that way.
Mhm. And I met Jenn first through um, her participation in, I think, the first Printmakers Against Racism campaign, asking people from all over to make prints and fundraise. Um, and this was shortly after the murder of George Floyd. That was the first call out. And Jenn participated, and her print was beautiful. And we didn't really communicate back and forth then. She had just participated in a few campaigns. And then I'm a therapist by day. I teach, and I was also at a certain point running mindfulness groups online. So it was a weekly meditation group that Jenn started to attend every now and then, and that's when there was a New Year's version of this group that I led, and I said that my goal for I was that 2023, Jen,
23.
2022.
23. It was the new year.
23. I said for that year, my phrase was to show up and show out. And after the end of that workshop event, she said, can you stay online? And I'd like to ask you something. Um, and she said, I've been talking with Melissa and some folks about building something, creating something at Hamilton. Would you be interested in participating? And you say, sure, 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 sure. Um, and a few months later, came the more fully fleshed out invitation to participate in the first BIWOC residency. So that's how we all kind of met and came together.
Great. Yeah. And then I'll just briefly say that I was first really introduced to all of your work in 2023, I believe, at that Ways Goose where you talked about that residency. Was that correct? That it was the fall after the summer residency?
Yes.
Yeah. And I remember being really struck by Jenn's response to Hamilton and your experience with coming back to do that residency after going to the Ways Goose for the first time in 2022. But yeah, and it was great that I met Desiree in one of the workshops that happened, Sarah Matthews book arts workshop, which was really wonderful. But also, I was just thinking that so my relationship with Hamilton is that I first started going there in 2018 as a student. I was a library student at the time, and my boss in UW Milwaukee Special Collections, he would take a lot of his grad students out there as kind of the field trip to be like, this is such an important place because of current letterpress printers and then also the history. And I was really inspired by that and went to the Ways Goose that year in 2018. And that was when I was introduced to Ben Blount's work and really felt that was such a powerful presentation, but also he had an exercise where he asked participants to, or the audience to talk to one another about a time that they felt othered. So it's very interesting, all these connections that we have and how Hamilton's kind of such a big part of that. And obviously there's a lot going on with Hamilton and access right now. And so I thought that maybe we will go into a little bit of what the current state of Hamilton is and access to the printmaking studios there.
Well, let me back up and just even say a little bit about how the BIWOC residency came to be. Jenn and I were at the 22 Ways Goose, and I'd taken a break and I was in my hotel room, and she came and knocked on the door, and she looked kind of a little bit sad, and I was like, "What's going on?" And she was like, "Well, I just want to tell you, I'm not gonna come back." And I was like, "What?" Like, I thought it was okay. I thought we were having a good time and I would have a partner in crime there. And she was like, no one's been mean to me. Nothing has happened. But there's just kind of like a vibe here, and I don't have any interest in coming back. And so I just felt really panicked, and I was like, oh no, this is not how I want anyone to feel. And I don't want someone with such tremendous talent and energy to go back home and never come back to this place that has so many resources. So at that time, we reached out to Rachel Simmons, and she was also wanting Jenn to come back. And so Rachel was like, you know what? Let's talk to Stephanie Carpenter. And so we went to Stephanie at that time. And so I was like, Stephanie, Jenn isn't coming back, but I think there's a way that we can figure out how to make, turn this around. And so that was the kind of impetus for starting the whole idea of, let's get some women of color in here so that no one feels alone or isolated in this, predominantly white space. And let's really get people familiar with Hamilton. And then let's see if we can kind of shift the energy. And so Stephanie, to her credit, she was like, yes, let's do it. And she found money and the time. I mean, it was just really wonderful. And we also had a great supporter in Jen Farrell, too. Jen Farrell was the artist in residence at Hamilton at that time. And so she was really trying to also increase the presence of women, period, at Hamilton. And so she was a big supporter, but she didn't want to take center stage in any kind of way. So it became Jenn, myself, and Stephanie really talking. And then Jenn was like, oh, I know who we could get to come too. Desirée came on board, and we had some other folks in mind, but it just ended up to just be the three of us for that first time. And it was 5 days. And it was amazing. I don't know if Jenn and Desirée want to chime in at this point.
I'll let Desirée chime in on that, but one of the things I wanted to say is when Stephanie found money, it was also crowd funded too through the letterpress community. It wasn't just donors or anything like that. It was the people that are part of the community that supported this and really wanted this to happen.
That's right. Yes.
Mhm.
Desiree.
I will chime in. For that first experience, 5, 6 days at Hamilton a week. We weren't in the studio all week, but um, it was just such an incredible experience to have felt that people in the community provided support for us to just have open time and space to create, to make things, to have this ginormous room. Y'all have been in there, or many of you have, to spread out, to set type, to leave it there and then come back to it the next day.
Mhm.
And to be there with Melissa and Jenn and the staff that was there, it felt effervescent. It felt like such a special time. And let me say out loud that for me, what was especially um, meaningful about it was, yes, the connection and the community, but just again, this opportunity to be in this space that is fully funded, right? Where I'm a working mom on a budget. I don't have room and space to create. I don't have all the tools and access. So to be able to just really drop in and be in that space was, I mean, it was absolutely incredible. It was such a gift. And we also had time and space to not work and to be in community, which was equally as valuable, I think, during that time. Um, so it was just such a remarkable experience. I'll pause there and ask if Melissa and Jenn have things to add to that.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that about the about all of our time wasn't spent at the museum. I think all of us in particular in our work are very much focused on community and healing. And so a big part of that first experience was how do we not only have this kind of creative drive, but how do we as healers in our communities back home really learn how to take care of ourselves and to figure out as women who give a whole bunch to our communities, also how do we do restorative practices. So every morning Desiree would lead us in a meditation and breath work. We would spend our lunchtime outside. We had one of the volunteers, Larry, who we really grew to love at Hamilton. He brought a table outside so we could sit out and look at the lake. And so we would have our lunch looking at the lake. Stephanie had set up time for us at a yoga studio. We went to dinner. We got a chance to meet the donor who donated funds for us to come, and she's become a friend of ours. And so it was really a special time. We packed a lot into 5 days. And by the time we left, we were like, how can we do more of this and get more people here?
Yes. And the only thing I want to add to that is even at that time, there were things that we wanted to use, equipment we wanted to use, and a part of the collection we wanted to use, but we weren't allowed to have access. At the time, it was like a disappointment that we weren't allowed to use like the Silver Bullet and the Silver Bullet collection. And so later on that this comes back up. At the time, we were just like, okay, well, we have 5 days. Let's just use what we can and what we have. But it does come back up later.
Yeah, I think something that has come up as you're all talking is access to the materials and the press, and that's something that I know, and I'm sure this is very familiar with everyone, just how this type of equipment is very hard and expensive to come by. So having like the space and the time um, seems so important. And this summer, you also had an opportunity to go back to Hamilton. And so I wanted to ask a little bit about, because there was another cohort of the BIWOC residency, correct, in 2024, so a different group of artists. And then it seems like something that was maybe important was having like a returning to Hamilton. So I was able to attend an event of your residency over the summer on Juneteenth Day, going over the art that you made this summer. So I wanted to ask, how was that experience different coming back to Hamilton this year?
It was
Or Jenn, you go first.
Jenn, you go first.
Yeah, it was great to come back this year, this summer. It was longer. And I think one of the things that was great about it is that we were at the point of like, talking about, growing this and like mentorship, us doing things to raise money, to bring other people in, to bring people to ways like this was, we were at that point, like we were ready to like do more, reach out to the masses. So that was an exciting part of this residency. Like we were able to talk about that um, with the staff and it was longer this time, but the vibe when we were there was different than when we were there in 2023. It was really heavy. Like we knew something was off, something was different. And that first week was really challenging. I think because we're so in tune when we're together, we're so in tune to one another, when um, something is off. And so we were able to have some conversations and work through that. And then the second week was great. Um, yeah, yeah, it was so it was bitter and it was sweet at the same time. And again, but this time it made a difference, like not asking, can we use the silver bullet
Oh,
as
buckle.
in specific, huh?
Silver buckle.
Silver buckle bullet. Um, if we could use that, the collection. And again, we were told no, that we could not have access and not even understanding why. I mean, it's a press and there's some collection and we were told no. Specifically, Tracy Hahn said that we weren't allowed to use it. And so again, having access denied. You can use this, but you can't use this. And not even for any special reason. It's not like if we use this press that we're all experienced printers. We're not going to break it. It's no different than some of the others. Like, so again, it was
Yeah.
that gatekeeping, denying the access. So
Just to interject really briefly, like I would say, yeah, it is strange because I've taken a class at Hamilton with Jen Farrell with that collection because it's mostly metal type, so it's a little bit different than the wood type collection. And so it's not like they don't have programming related to that collection. So it is strange that you would be denied use
and
of that.
time, twice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Can I just interject 1 second? I want to also say that the residencies weren't the only things that grew and prospered during this time. in 2022, you fill out an evaluation every time you go to Ways Goose. So one of my evaluations would always be there need to be more women speakers, there need to be more people of color, and this is just me being a little snarky. I was like, I don't want to hear about any more paper. I was like, I don't want to hear about deteriorating paper and mold. I want to hear about dynamic work that people are doing. What kind of advocacy are people doing? And so I'm sure people were just like, well, we know Melissa, it's supposed to be anonymous, but I'm sure everybody knew it was me making those comments. So after 2022 and 2023, we did our talk, but there was also Sarah Matthews, who was doing a workshop. There were more students of color who came that year. There were more younger people in 2023 and more queer folks in 2023. In 2024, this orange abomination was elected. And so we were all there together. And again, the speaker lineup was dynamic. We had Jen Farrell and Sarah Matthews to kick off Ways Goose. I can't remember the woman's name. She's worked on Wes Anderson's movies. She gave the keynote. And so, again, there were younger people there. There were newer people there. And so this interjection of diversity, you could see it being realized also in Ways Goose. And that was one of the gratifying things about what we were doing. And 2025 Ways Goose was set up to be the most dynamic and diverse and most inclusive Ways Goose that I had ever seen. And we were all so very much excited. And I'm going to be transparent. I'm not an experienced printer, so I could see me being banned from this silver buckled thing. But the first time we were there, I didn't even know that we weren't using the Vandercooks because I'm too scared to use Vandercook. So I was just happy to have a big old sign press, so I didn't even know we were being limited in what we were being had access to until, like Jenn said, this all comes out later when we get there in 2025 and the energy is just funky. The other issue that was kind of overshadowing all of this was the executive director, Peter Crabb, who was there, and his incompetency colored everything. And his incompetency, every time we interacted with him, was appalling. And so I began to have issues with why was he there? Why was he still there? 2022, he was there. 2023, well, why are you still here? 2024, oh, okay, this is ridiculous. You're still here. And then 2025. So that's all percolating in the background of all of this as well.
Desirée, did you want to say anything about how
What was our original question?
It was just how this experience. So you were first there for the BIWOC residency in 2023, and then again this summer as kind of like a return. And it was longer. I will say that also it should be mentioned that your event where you got to talk about the work that you made was so wonderful, very well attended. So it was definitely, I feel, supported by the broader community, but obviously colored by some of these other things going on.
So thank you for repeating that. It gave me more time to gather thoughts. I'll echo that. I mean, when we say the vibes were different, I mean you could just feel the tension in the space, and that's a really big space, right? So it wasn't it was significant, and knowing not even knowing everything that I know now, but beginning to learn about some of it and um, seeing I mean um, just that you could already kind of observe a shift in the morale
Mm-hmm.
of the staff, which was clear, even without, hearing what the details were. And like my colleagues have said, we're all pretty empathic. So I mean, that was something that we were swimming in through that time there. But we had conversations, we boosted ourselves up and made it through. And so that was quite different in this second round. But the artist talk, I'm glad that you brought it up. There were so many people who attended. And it was such a diverse audience. People came from all over the region, and it was really remarkable to hear, um, you know, people who weren't otherwise really engaged or found value in this kind of programming raise their hand or talk to us afterwards and say, I didn't really think this kind of stuff was that like really valuable. But after hearing what you all have shared and what you've done with your time here and what you've created and what you are all just trying to do with your work and creativity, wow, this matters. And to have people raise their hand at the talk and say, I'm floored by this. I'm so impressed. What can we do? And this wasn't a mole, we didn't plant them. What are some things that we can do to keep this going, to support this? Wow. And so, one of the things that was shared was keep attending events, become a member. There were people that became members of the museum that night.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember also saying, even at that time, this was in June, folks. This was in June, knowing everything that was percolating, I said, if you appreciate this programming, write to the board. Write to the board and let them know what you're seeing here, why you think it's valuable, why it should continue to be supported. It was, I don't know. I cry a lot, and I don't know if I became strident and was tearful at that time, but even then we were already telling folks, if you appreciate this, please let folks know because we're already getting some idea that this isn't supported at all levels of this institution. Um, Ooh, I'm getting hot. I'll pause there. So that was a big difference for me in the second round.
Yeah, I remember as an attendee of that event that call to write to the board really was struck me because it's like, well, of course they support what's going on and to like find out how behind the scenes that really hasn't been the case. And we can get more into that, obviously. I do want to say that someone in the chat said that that presentation was one of the best received and best attended events at Hamilton, and that they walked away from it also very energized. So it does feel like you had a momentum building. And as Jenn was saying, that you were planning to kind of expand on this and go into like mentorship or other opportunities to kind of keep this going. And so I guess we could get into a little bit of when did things start to reveal themselves more over the summer of what's been going on at Hamilton?
Well, it kind of started percolating before we got to Hamilton, but we didn't know how bad it was. Uh, Back in April, as I mentioned, Peter Crabb, the former executive director, was a big issue. And so I'd been saying to everybody who would listen that, I think he is a big problem, but I think he is being scapegoated because the people who would hire him are an even bigger problem because his incompetency was so evident. It just defies any kind of rationale as to how he got hired. And so I began saying, who's on the board? How could I get on the board? And again, I'm a new person in this community. Um, and so I was just like, I don't know if I want to be on the board, but I know that I don't want someone who's incompetent running this place, especially as it was becoming much more important to me. So I'd written to Tracy Hahn back in April 16th, and said to her, can I just get a meeting with you to talk about some of my concerns and what I've noticed? And I really am concerned that Peter may be still employed when we go for the residency. Because, he is just not a very, I'm trying to be diplomatic, not enjoyable to engage in conversation. So I don't have much tolerance for uh, people who are idiots. So I just was like, I would like for him not to be there when we come. So how could we, so I was like, let's talk. So she didn't email me for about a month. And so I emailed back and said, what's going on? I know everybody's busy. So that was May. She didn't say anything, but then she was like, oh, I think maybe late May, she responded and was like, I've been really busy and traveling. So we all went to CBAA before we went to our residency. Tracy Hahn was at CBAA. And you would think with somebody that you're familiar with asked you a question of importance, and I also inquired about how does one get on the board, you would take somebody aside and be like, hey, I didn't email you back, let's talk, but no conversation at CBAA at all. And so that was in the background before we went. So then when we got to Hamilton and the energy was so low, I was like, what, we were all like, what's going on? And so we began to just talk about what could we do to make it better for them? What kinds of things, how could we help? That was our question to the staff and to each other. Like, what could we do to kind of salvage the situation in any kind of way? I don't know if Desiree and Jim want to.
I'll add, I'll just add that, yeah, that question of what can we do was batted around desperately for months.
Mm-hmm.
Because at that point, it was, what would you do? What would you say? And who would care? And who would listen? And who are we? And that's just what spirals in my brain and some of what we've talked about. And, we have a lot of information that's public now, and a lot of that wasn't before. And so I think in our calculations and conversations of, well, what the hell can we do? We were very mindful of just where everyone was at and what the boundaries were, um, in terms of what people were ready for, what had been um, shared. Um, is that the best way to say it, Jenn and Melissa?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're spot on that we were very protective of the staff. That was paramount. And we were trying to be strategic in who do we reach out to, and who can we um get to help us figure this out without betraying any kind of confidences at that time. But the other thing that was really striking to us at that moment is that, you know, when everybody comes to Ways Goose, it's all shiny and bright and everybody is happy to be in community with one another. And what we quickly realized is that most people's understanding of Hamilton is through Ways Goose. There's not a lot of visiting outside of that time. So, and Ways Goose often feels like a reunion of sorts. So everybody is happy and bright. What we discovered this past summer was that there are 4 people really who are holding Hamilton together. And that is Stephanie Carpenter, Abby Diaz, Gina Alvarez, and Jen Ann. And I can't remember Jen Ann's last name. I'm so sorry, Jen Ann. But their level of work ethic and commitment to Hamilton was just remarkable. And the way that they work to preserve this museum in this community that has been economically devastated is just remarkable. And we were like, how do we let people know how much they are struggling and how much they are underappreciated and undervalued, and working under oppressive work conditions?
Toxic work
Yes,
conditions.
yes, yes, yes. So, should I say what I did next? Or,
Sure. Yeah, I guess wanting to know, obviously a lot of this started becoming public, and so when did that happen? What did you do next?
well, I was pretty hot. So I reached out during the residency to see if I could talk to Tracy Hahn. And she was like, no, I'm on vacation. I can't speak with you, but I could talk to you June 23rd. Now, mind you, I had reached out to her originally April 16th. So the first time she's available to speak to me is June 23rd, which was the day after our residency ended. So we set up a meeting. She and I talked via FaceTime. And needless to say, that conversation did not go very well. And I was pretty forthright in my experience of Peter. I was forthright in my saying that I didn't wanted to know what the board was doing different so that they could make better decisions with respect to a new hire. I wanted to know when they were going to begin hiring a new person, because I still did not understand why you would have someone with his level of incompetence on the payroll. And I also spoke with her at that time about wanting to be on the board. And so she seemed very flustered that I was even talking to her about that. And so she went on to try and explain to me the history of Hamilton and how much she had done for Hamilton in the past. And I said, I have no doubts that you care very much about Hamilton and have worked, but the level of incompetence right now, today, is alarming. So let's keep the conversation to today. she got frustrated with me and ended up telling me during that conversation, and I'm truncating the conversation. She told me that what I had to say didn't matter. And so I was a little taken aback, but it was so absurd that I thought it was funny. I was just like, is she being real? I thought maybe she was joking and misspoke. And so I said, Tracy, I just want to make sure that I'm understanding what you said, I said, are you really telling a middle-aged Black woman in 2025 that what she has to say doesn't matter? And she paused for a second and she was like, yes, what you have to say does not matter. I thought you were coming to talk to me about your residency. And so I was like, I find it hard to believe that you thought I was calling to talk to you about the residency when I emailed you 3 months ago in April and told you what I wanted to talk about. So I wrote in my notes, so that I could tell Jenn and Desirée later. I was like, oh, she wants me to be grateful. And I am being too high and mighty for her. I didn't know my place. She wanted to make sure I knew my place, which was nothing in her eyes. And so I got off the phone with her, and then I contacted who I thought might be an ally on the board. And that conversation didn't end up happening until the beginning of July, after the 4th of July holiday, which was Dan Radigan. So I had a conversation with Dan Radigan, and he unfortunately was no help, and eventually said to me, you know, change comes from the bottom up. And so I said, okay, Dan, I just want you to know what you're saying. I said, because we are going to do something about this. And so I just want you to be prepared. And so he was like, okay. So then I got Desirée and Jenn involved, and I wrote a letter back to Tracy, saying to Tracy in a really polite way that I didn't have any confidence in her leadership, and you know, laid out what I thought the issues were, and again wanted to be on the board and wanted to involve more people in the community as to what the issues were. And then everything kind of spiraled from there.
Mhm. Yeah, because that was all taking place end of June. And then in July, after these conversations were happening, I think there was some sharing amongst community, Melissa and some community members of, I'm trying to have these conversations. Here's what I'm hearing so far. That was July. And that brings us kind of towards the end of July and then the beginning of August, when that kind of brings us up to date to almost 3 months ago, um, when we learned, I think it was the text came in from Melissa. I just learned um, that eBay's residency was abruptly canceled, and she's incredibly upset. So I think that, what else, Jenn?
Yeah, can I just add in before that, when Melissa was having conversations, it was hard for people to wrap their brain around what Melissa was sharing. Like, she was sharing what was happening, um, but people, I'm not even going to say they didn't take it seriously. It was just hard for people to wrap their brain around it. Like, this can't be happening. No, not Tracy, not, so not Dan. Like, it was hard for people to really wrap their brains around it. So I want to say that I think that's an important piece in all of this, because as Melissa was reaching out to people, it was a hard pill to swallow for people. And, you know, they weren't necessarily on board, because they couldn't wrap their brain around it. So I wanted to say that. And then, yeah, then it comes down to August. Melissa sent a text. Rachel Simmons sent a text about what had happened with eBay. eBay was the tipping point, I think, into where we are now. It was a tipping point. It was like, okay, what's going on? And all these conversations of trying to figure out, you know, trying to find answers of like, why was this canceled? What's happening here? Trying to get answers and not being able to get any answers. I mean, to have eBay's residency canceled along with programming was canceled. There were other events that were supposed to take place as well that were canceled. Um, but eBay was the tipping point for that.
And I'll add to that. um, I'm just stuck on the phrase you mentioned, it was a hard pill for people to swallow. People weren't swallowing it.
They
Like I'm
couldn't.
gonna get a little sharp right here, right? If we zoom out into the wider cultural context, what's been very frustrating about this situation is here's Melissa kind of raising her hand for a while. I have something to say. I'm concerned about something. Will someone listen? I'm pointing out some valid concerns. Okay, she's getting batted away. She's getting responded to. Okay, this is kind of par for the course sometimes, like we deal with institutions. But to then, as this continues with eBay's story as the tipping point, to continue to hear from folks, are we sure? Is it really that bad? Is it really like the just the question be, is just like it won't be like dignified with some real inquiry of like maybe what these folks are saying is a concern. That has been, I think, a frustration. And eBay being the tipping point, because even though we kind of knew there was some pushback within the institution of some of this diverse and inclusive and welcoming programming, to get to this point with eBay where she wasn't even dignified with like a professional response, a conversation, an opportunity, right? If to catch people up if you haven't read everything, right? When she said, "Why is this happening? Can I speak to the board?" They will not speak with you. And she still shows up and says, "Can I print?" No, you may not print. Can I pay the public fee to print? No, you may not. And there are other people in the building printing. I I those are just additional words I'd like to share in terms of some of the frustration that I know some of us have been holding around this conversation. I mean, so to have the statements of support from SGC International, from College Book Arts Association, and others, which will be coming along, which we're grateful for and lends legitimacy and validation and credibility to all this. We're grateful for that support. And this is just to underline something that is like systemic in our conditioning around. Are you sure? Are you sure that happened? Is it really that bad? And that's something that I would invite everyone in this community to continue to pay attention to in our spaces when people are raising their hand to share something important.
Can I,
I'll pause
uh,
there.
sorry, can I interject just 1 second? So,
Mhm.
um, if we put out graphic impressions the 1st of November, and the panelists were in an exhibition, and I interviewed eBay. And if you have a chance, if you haven't read that yet, I encourage you to read it. Everything, her perspective on what happened with Hamilton is towards the end of that interview. And she really goes into detail about how she tried to interact with the board, and her sort of connection, her seeing it as sort of a continuation of the civil rights work that her family had done. So if you haven't checked that out yet, I encourage you to.
Yeah. I encourage you to also. It's a great interview. Um, and then to go along with that, when when I said that the programs were canceled, the residencies were canceled, but even when eBay showed up to the museum, there was a class and they still had programs going on. So it seems like all the public programs and the residencies, like those were taken off the board, but these school visits were still happening. So when they say that they canceled all the programming, that's not even true because those schools were still coming in, they were still coming into print, and yet here again, people are denied access
That had been invited.
that have been invited.
That
And
had been
not
invited.
just invited, eBay's time or her residency was already covered in cost, meaning that the BIWOC funds, it was already paid for. It was with restricted funds that she was coming. So Hamilton wasn't even paying all this money for her. It was already there. It was a done deal. It was from donors and a grant.
Mm-hmm.
So there was nothing that anyone on the board could say that could justify the cancellation of that residency. There's nothing. There was nothing. No excuse.
Yes, and it seemed like it was very short notice.
Yeah.
And as you said, that she showed up to the museum and then was still denied access. Um, can you explain? I believe that you've had some conversations when I don't know if it was when it became publicly known that this happened, that there were some conversations between Tracy and eBay about that cancellation.
Yeah, there were two conversations. One with the book arts panel that was part of the programming for the Ways Goose. So Julie Chen, Rachel Simmons, and I met with Tracy Hahn. We requested a meeting with her on August 17th, and she couldn't meet with us until August 27th, even though in our email we stated the urgency of the meeting. But 10 days later, we have this meeting, and in this meeting, she gave us nothing. I mean, she explained nothing. It was, she's like, I'm not at liberty to say, or I cannot say. And then she's somewhere in the conversation it came up, but you understand like the optics, she's like, I know what the optics look like, but still could not explain anything. And finally at one point I said, okay, when the board got together and you guys made this decision to cancel this residency, you had to know that there would be some sort of consequence or fallout from this. And she just said, yeah, yeah. And I'm like, okay. And when I say it was it wasn't even really a conversation that we had. It was a dialogue happened, but there was nothing of like, okay, this is not good. This is a mess. How do we work toward repair? You know, she didn't want to hear, you know, excuse me, anything about repair. And so there was nothing left for us to say. Sorry. The conversation was going, it went nowhere. And so it was then at that point, at the end, that the book arts panel was like, okay, she gave us nothing. There was nothing to work with. We're going to pull out. This is a conversation we have been talking about. I had already decided to pull out, and I was going to wait to see what the book arts panel did. And then later, I want to say September 2nd or 3rd, we met with Tracy again. It was this time the meeting was between eBay and Tracy Hahn, and she invited Ben Blount and myself to be there as support and to bear witness, right, to the conversation. And the same thing, I mean, it was the same thing. I do think Tracy like listened to eBay. When I say that, I mean allowing her to speak. And so eBay was able to really share how she felt, what she would like to see happen. eBay had some asks of Tracy and the rest of the board. She had a whole proposal for them that she laid out. And Tracy said, okay, yes, I'll take this back to the board and we'll get back to you. And again, that was September 2nd. It was either the 2nd or the 3rd. I have it written down. And she's heard nothing. She's heard nothing from the board. Absolutely nothing. And so that was the last conversation with Tracy. And, you know, in the meantime, the board put out those 2 statements on their website and on Instagram. And we all know what those statements were. So, or most of us, they weren't good. And then they turned off comments. So they were not interested in hearing from the community.
Can you share what eBay was asking?
Yeah, so it wasn't even for herself. What eBay wants is access to the presses, to the collection, not even for herself, but for the people to come. Her ask was that they would continue the BIWOC they would commit to the BIWOC residencies for, I think 3 or 5, it was either 3 or 5 years. And the education, it was for young people, it's for access to the presses, you know, that's all her ask was. It wasn't even like, I want this for myself or anything like that. It was all about, you know, still allowing people in access, have people having access to everything.
Yeah, and as you have mentioned previously, these BIWOC residencies are also paid for, and it's not, it's something that's supported. So it just seems, yeah, that it should be an easy, easy thing to agree to.
One would think, but then here we are having this conversation. Like there's so many things that, you know, that may be logical to many of us, but it hasn't unfolded that way logically.
Can you all sort of explain, obviously, so Hamilton released those two statements and the one where they shut off all the comments, but can you explain sort of the consequences of not taking accountability and how, as Melissa was talking about, there was set to be a very dynamic, wonderful Ways Goose happening, but obvious that isn't going to be happening this year, and why is that?
Yeah, I think I think like Desiree said a few moments ago about zooming out. What is happening with Hamilton almost mimics exactly what's happening in our larger culture that we see happening in DC with the person currently occupying the White House. Instead of having people be inclusive and appreciating diversity, he would literally rather tear the house down. And so that's what you're seeing with Hamilton. Tracy and the current board would rather tear Hamilton down than to let people of color come into the doors. And so I really want to be clear about there is no disguising what this is about. Now, whether or not she has a greater consciousness about where her behavior and actions are coming from, I don't know. But I know that white people and white groups are still being allowed to print at Hamilton. And Black women were denied access literally at the front door. And she seems to have said to me in particular that, you know, in very plain language, I don't matter, and didn't fear any retribution about being so vocal about that. So, you know, any kind of discussion of what, well, maybe this could be something else is just not accurate. And I believe Tracy was acting in retribution and in retaliation for my having questioned her competency. And so, you know, it's getting later, and I know that you all have very kindly signed on to hear us talk about these issues. And I so appreciate your presence and taking the time to hear us all out. But this is a very, very sad moment in the history of our country and in the history of Hamilton.
Yeah, and I would say that it seems like they've been doubling down where just sort of not taking any sort of accountability for this or addressing it. And at the same time that this is all happening, they're also selecting a new director of the museum. And so it seems like that could have been an opportunity to address these larger issues, but that hasn't been the case so far.
No, she's co-signed everything that the board has done and doubled down herself and has not been curious about the community. She calls ink paint. And, you know, she just she's a direct reflection of the board's incompetence. And I would, and it's a pretty tall bar to be worse than Peter Crab, but in a month, she has proven herself to be worse than Peter Crab, which is pretty atrocious. So I don't have any high hopes for this woman, Beth Kowalski, at all. And she's been disrespectful to the community. And this latest statement that she put out, Desirée noted that she othered us in her statement. And the statement is so idiotic. You know, how could you be sitting in a history museum, a history of type and letterpress, and talk about how you don't want to look back? You're in a fucking museum. Excuse me. Okay? That's the point of a museum, is to preserve history and look back. You're not looking forward. So I don't know how you could get any more ridiculous than
that. Just to read that part of the statement. So this was her sort of introduction. And she says, please know that we are aware of others' efforts to look back, and while we respect those individuals and groups' rights to voice their opinions, we also need to forge ahead in our important work for the future of the museum. And as somebody who has been going to the museum, going to various events and things over the years, I don't think what they're doing right now really ensures a future for Hamilton if they're basically shunning their community.
I mean, not only for her to come out with that statement, and this is like the first statement other than her introduction, right? Like, this is the first thing that she has said. And for her not to have met with people from the community that have reached out to her to have a conversation, to really hear the other side of the story, because I'm sure she's heard stuff from the board, right? And the first thing that's the first statement that you want to put out. You want to other us. Like, this is what we're working with. I mean, you would think that when she took the position and she knew some things were happening, right? And maybe she didn't know all the details, but I mean, logically, a person logically coming into a new space, you would want to know what's going on with the community. You would want to know what they have to say. This is your job. These are the people that you're going to you're going to be maybe not working with directly all the time, but they're Hamilton's community. And for you not to take that upon yourself to find out more, to at least meet with one of the numerous people from the community that's reached out to you to find out more, and then for you to put out that statement in your newsletter, we know what we're working with. We know what we're working with.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
It shows we do not matter. You othered us. You talked about respect in that statement. And yeah, I think Beth, like, not too much has been said about her, but that was not a good move. Not a good move for her.
And I would also say that this was also, I believe, included in an email asking for, oh, renew your membership and do all that stuff. And it's like, uh, sort of just a little, yeah, not reading the room of what's going on. And I would also say that they weren't very honest about why Ways Goose was canceled, and that a lot of that had to do with presenters and workshop instructors pulling out of what they were going to do at Ways Goose. And that hasn't been clear in why that was canceled.
Yeah,
Mhm.
very opaque.
Um, Sharon had a question in the chat. She said, I understand the staff was also forbidden to discuss any of this. Um, and we've heard from Abby's posts on Instagram sort of refuting the letter that they wrote to SGCI, saying that they were basically under a gag order. Do you have anything else to sort of add to that? I know we don't probably don't want to talk for them too much, but
Um, like, let me filter. Um, I don't know that we have to add too much more. Again, it's just another example of how, you know, I think they're reading the room and just actively choosing to dismiss and not address what they're seeing, whether it's, concerns that the staff has been sharing, or with the community, and with the board, and now Beth, the new ED. The two words that keep ringing in my brain, and sorry, Melissa and Jen, you've heard this from me already before, but the first is just like the ongoing brazenness
Mm-hmm.
of each action, each word, each response. I think most of us at each juncture, we've thought it could not get any worse, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and just again, like the brazenness of, this is what we're going to say. This is what we're going to do. This is who we're just not, again, going to dignify with the response. Um, and let's see if we will be made to suffer any consequences from that, right? So just the brazenness piece. And then the other piece here is just this like betrayal, right? I think is a good word, disappointment and betrayal. Like, there's been so much time and effort that so many people have poured into this community and into this institution. And to continue to get these dismissive responses and turning away from any kind of accountability. And look, I know relationships. I'm a therapist. I've worked with couples, right? There's been no, there's like the key ingredients, right? There's been no effort displayed. There's no willingness, because like no one's looking for some kind of perfect embodiment of an answer. But is there any kind of humility or like courageous conversation being invited into the room? None of that has been happening. And again, if we zoom out into the context of the history of what letterpress has been, right, as a medium of resistance, of freedom of expression, of getting to say whatever the heck you want to print, because other people won't print it or say it, um, especially to have an institution that holds these tools and is stating that we're here to preserve them for creative use for today. Um, if you take all of that into the view, um, and hold that with what the current leadership is um, doing with it. Um, it's just incredibly sad and disappointing. And so to circle back to the consequences of all this, right? Of first the artist book panel and all the book arts programming being withdrawn. I mean, can we just say out loud I don't know if anyone, how many people know this, but how incredibly painful those decisions were. for Rachel Simmons, for the artist book panel, for each presenter that had to decide, do I really have to withdraw? I so want to go. I so want to go and see this lineup and be with the tribe and the people and get inspired, right? And so the consequence of this, of being, forced to, well, I guess we have to live within our values and integrity and say out loud, we can't do this. We can't abide by this. It has been such an incredibly painful conversation and decision, and like the loss and grief and mourning and tears also. Let's just to say that out loud also. Um, it's just been like a lot, and none of this had to happen. None of it had to happen. There were so many opportunities to just try and get some. Is there any kind of earnest effort or willingness? Just some words, just some humility. You're not
Yeah.
going to give us anything?
Yeah.
Okay. It's just been
Mm.
so
Can,
sad.
yeah. Can you explain some of the pressure that you three and others have been putting on Hamilton, the amount of work that you've been doing to hold them accountable for this?
I would say it's mainly Desirée and Jenn. They are, I can't, there comes, I think it's very rare that you meet people who you just instantly connect with and bond with, and just have a great deal of respect. And the time and energy that they have dedicated to this is just remarkable. This has consumed our lives since June. And we are all very new to the Hamilton community, Desirée especially. And Desirée built a website, set up the petitions.
Jenn set up the petitions with
Jenn set up the petition. Listen, I am not the detail person, so let me just be transparent about that. But they have just been stellar, and I cannot thank them enough for listening to me and for being unwavering in this campaign. Because what I think the board hopes to do is that the community will dismiss us, and that the community will think it is us who is tearing Hamilton down. And I think they're trying to outweight all of this and hope that it will go away. And I will also say, I don't want to speak for the staff, but what we witnessed this summer, and this is what I shared with Dan Radigan when I spoke with him, is that these women have been terrorized. And I don't use that word lightly. They have been terrorized and humiliated. And just that alone is inexcusable. And they are the only reason that the doors of Hamilton open not every day, but Tuesday through Saturday. They are there. And not getting nearly enough pay, but they show up and they do their job, and they do it with heart and soul. And to disrespect their contribution is just disgusting. and to mete out harm to them, I don't even have a word to articulate how horrible they have treated these women. So I just hope everybody walks away from this discussion or just bearing witness to what we have to say with your own commitment to help us in the community put Hamilton back on the trajectory that it was on, which was upward. It was upward, it was open, and it was so much fun. That's the other thing. It wasn't just, let's talk about racism 24 hours a day. It was about how do we really build a beloved community, one where everybody is seen and respected and invited in and feels like it's worth it to make the trek to Two Rivers, Wisconsin. Because I jokingly say, nobody wants to go to Two Rivers, Wisconsin. I think I'm the only person who would like to live there. But,
Yeah. And now here we are at this point where Wingate Foundation has stepped into the picture, right? And Hamilton, they're on notice. I mean, it's already been what, 2.5 weeks, almost 3 weeks.
3 weeks.
3 weeks. One more week. One more week. This is where we're at. And if you haven't seen the post or the letters on the website, wearehamfam.info, it's all there. But please take a look. But this is where we are. This is where things stand right now. Has there been any movement from the board? No. Nope.
Can you say what Wingate said, summarize basically?
Yeah, I mean, Wingate really called them out on their lack of financial responsibility, that they had been trying to get basic information from them about the budget, dating back to August. I'm looking, so I don't want to get it wrong. On August 6th, they requested information, their financials, and they did turn in some of them, but they didn't turn in everything to them. So that's August 6th. So that's even before all of this stuff went public. So Wingate was already dealing with Hamilton. But basically, Wingate is like, we're going to pull our endowment if you don't do the following steps. 1, the immediate resignation of the current executive committee members, Tracy Hahn, Angela Spinazzi, and Jerome Fox. 2, a formal commitment to engage an external consultant to assess and guide the organization for recovery. This should include consideration of a committee composed of members from the printing community. A clear plan to restore programming at the earliest opportunity in order to rebuild earned income and organizational stability. And 4, a commitment to prioritize the addition of new board members from underrepresented racial groups, ensuring broader perspective in board leadership. And so, I mean, it just goes on, but the last line, it says, We respectfully request a unanimous written response from the full board sent to me, not me, via email, including a detailed plan to move forward within 30 days of the date of this letter. And the date of this letter is October 13th. And that's signed by the executive director, Patricia Forgy.
And so that 30-day deadline is coming up
Next week.
on November 12th, which is next Wednesday.
And yeah, the ask even from Wingate is not a lot. Like, it's not a lot. But yet this is where we stand. And even with Wingate, we're talking, it's not chump change. This is big money. If you read the letter, annual support of $414,000 a year. We should not even, this should not even be happening, right? When you think about the kind of money we're talking about. So
Yeah. Someone from the chat says, does anyone want to talk about the Logan Foundation?
do either one of you want to talk about the Logan Foundation?
Okay, give me a beat. The David and the Reva and David Logan Foundation is one of Hamilton's main funders. They've from what I've read on the website and what folks have shared, previous grants from the Logan Foundation have helped to purchase a major part of their collection and the building, which they are, I believe, paying off and leasing back to Hamilton. What else is there to say about that? The postcard campaign and the petition has been directed to the Logan Foundation and not to Hamilton because we know they have been such a major funder and support in the past. And so we've hoped to apply additional pressure there. What else should be added to that, Jen?
Also say that Angela Spinazzi, who's the vice president of the board, is also partners with
Richard.
Logan.
Yeah,
Head of the
and
foundation.
Desirée has made it very clear on several occasions that the Logan Foundation's the Reva and David Logan Foundation, if you look at their mission statement and their ethics and goals are ones of social justice and equity and underrepresented communities. And so we just want them to know that Hamilton is operating in direct opposition to those goals. So Wingate understood that. You would think the Logan Foundation would understand that too. But let me bring up that it should be a conflict of interest to have one's paramour on the board where you are giving money.
So you mentioned the postcard campaign. I'm sure plenty of people here want to support and help with this call for the change of board leadership and accountability at Hamilton. Are there things that you would like people to do to support this?
Yes, I mean, you can still take part of the postcard campaign. It's all on the website. You can actually, if you haven't signed the petition, you can still sign the petition. We were going to take it down, but then the Wingate letter came out, so we decided to keep it up until the 30 days is up for Hamilton. So if you haven't signed, please sign. Please join the postcard campaign. I think Desiree just dropped everything into the chat. Um, so it's there for you. So we will be sending a second round of those signatures from the petition. I think last time I looked, I think we were at 518 signatures.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so, sorry, go ahead, Sarah. I was just gonna
Oh
say,
no, I was just
looking at
gonna
the time.
say, yeah, that we're kind of going long on time, but I was just, if you had any other thoughts, or if we wanted to open up to questions,
Mhm.
any final thoughts?
Can open it up for questions, I would think.
Would it help you folks to change the view so you can kind of see all your friends that are here right now? Should we keep it speakers?
I can see everyone
Okay.
on my screen.
I can too.
So maybe if folks want to raise their hand and voice their questions in space, or also drop into the chat, that's okay too. Sharon.
I have a question. So I just want to make sure I understand this with Wingate. Are they saying if those items are not met, they will no longer fund them at all? Like that's it, the money stops? And I guess following that is, Desiree, you in particular have done a lot of digging on their financials and not been able to get all the information you want, but do you have a sense that the museum will be able to operate without that funding?
It, from what we can see, it's the most significant part of the annual funding support. And correct me if I'm wrong, the Wingate letter, it appears that they've said, if these demands are not met, we will withhold um, this payment. I don't know if right. I think there's a dot, dot, dot. Um, so I think it's the opening, what's it called when you toss something across the transom? Um,
Salvo.
what's that?
An opening salvo.
Yes, yes, and to see what the response is before seeing what's really next. And I think that's been, if there's no response, that my common response has been like, it's unbelievable. How does this keep happening? It's unbelievable. So I guess we'll see, but it's such a major part of their annual funding that and with the Ways Goose being canceled, which is a major portion of their annual revenue. It's like 21 to 22%, at least that's from 2022 numbers. Um, unless some other major donor zooms in to fill that hole, I don't know what the future looks like for them. And if whoever might come in to fill that hole, will also likely hear from us. I'll pause there. Any any other thoughts, Melissa and Jenn?
I think if people have personal relationships with the other folks on the board, if you want to reach out to them and make an appeal to their what may be left of their sense of decency, to see, because we've been focused on the executive part of the board, but there are still, what, 4 or 5 other people who have not officially resigned. We haven't really heard from them. I can't remember their names at this moment, but if people want to make appeals to those folks, I think people have tried to reach out to them, but you know, I just want people to be really clear that if you are not fighting against what's happening, you're complicit in the harm that this current board is committing. So there's no neutrality with respect to this situation.
Other thoughts or questions or shares?
Well, when I wrote the blurb for this event to get people to sign up, even though I knew this was pretty much what this conversation was going to be, one of the things that I mentioned was, a question of how letterpress can get noticed, can get eyes in the algorithm, and so circling back to the sort of campaign to keep the pressure on Hamilton, can you talk about maybe how your experience as letterpress printers prepared you for this sort of advocacy and for this campaign, and how the sort of aesthetics of letterpress helped, and the community of letterpress, et cetera, et cetera?
I can jump in. When what do I want to say? COVID 2020, everything awful happening at that time. That was when I started the Printmakers Against Racism campaign, and which was terrifying to launch and to invite people into, will people participate? Will people listen? And overwhelmingly, the print community participated, and it was so eye-opening for me as someone who was, I mean, just a few years into engaging in letterpress, to see how, what's the word? It's late, brain work. Just just quickly people jumped in to participate, especially when the call was one to do something important, to engage, to, even if it was in some small way, create something, share it out, add your voice to this, raise money, look in your own backyards and see what you can also do there. Use your creative tools in any way, shape, or form that you can, and to see that invitation to this community be responded to over and over again, was was a lesson for me of just this, the strength and power of this community to kind of quickly join into an invitation and align and to get moving and to do something. And it has been maybe 2 or 3 years since I did the last campaign. And so to kind of re-enter this space online and in social media, and to share out again and to say, hey, something's happening. We need support. We need your voice. Who's in? And to see again who's in and who's picked up the baton and helped to run with it. Using social media specifically as a platform, and as a tool to intentionally deploy our messages out. And specifically with prints, right? Like with some of the updates that I share, or the invitations to participate. I'll make a print because a print engages, right, in a tactile and different kind of way than uh, graphic in Canva will, right? Whether it's in person or even online, people know that effort and love and some kind of care and intention went into that. And so I think where the intersection of using social media and our print tools and creativity um, combine together in a really powerful way that helps us move things out and organize and engage folks faster.
Power
Mm-hmm.
of the press.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that's what printers do. They they are activated and they print. It's like, I wouldn't say second nature, but it's really like that's first nature. There's a call. Okay, this is how we respond. This is how our voice is heard. You know, this is how we tell the story.
And we know the power of storytelling and who gets to tell whose story. And I think social media has been a game changer with respect to access and the printed word. I'm married to a person who works in advertising. And so, to have aesthetics and storytelling work in such a powerful marketing kind of way, I mean, that's what we're doing. We're trying to do a campaign of persuasion and one in which people are humanized and activated to care about one another. That's powerful.
Any other questions or thoughts? No?
I'm sure you've all seen a bit in the chat of just how many people are so supportive of what you're doing and very thankful. So hopefully this keeps the momentum going and keeping the pressure on.
Yeah, yeah. And I just wanted to, I think Melissa said it earlier, thanking you for your time to be a part of this. I want to say thank you to SGC International
Mhm.
for even putting this on, and support. I mean, this event, yes, but then even just the statement of support,
Mhm.
that it means everything. And I think it really, it's almost like a gateway has been opened more through this for printmaking and letterpress and how we live in the same spaces, right? In that we can work together. And so I just wanted to say thank you for that. And I also wanted to say, even like this would have been Ways Goose weekend, right?
Mhm.
It's coming up. People would just be arriving at Ways, in Two Rivers. And um, that even though Ways Goose isn't happening, there are some things still happening this weekend. I think Brad Vetter did a great Instagram post if someone wants to drop that into the chat of different events that are happening that people can participate in. I know there's the Loosey Goosey that's happening and some meetups, just so people can still be together this this weekend. I know it's hard that not everyone is together, but there are still some things that you can participate in. So if you can, check those out. And I think they did drop the link in the chat to
Mhm.
see what that is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, well, again, thank you for sharing your story and for doing this. Thank you to everyone for being here. Somebody was thanking SGC in the chat, and what I said was, this was an easy and inspiring bandwagon to jump on. Um, and I'm really glad that we could help. Uh, and I know a number of you that are here tonight are new members to SGCI, in part probably so you could come to this event. I appreciate that. SGCI appreciates that. And we want to hear from you to know how we can continue to collaborate with letterpress printers, how we can make you feel welcome in the broader SGCI and the broader printmaking community. So hopefully this isn't the last time that we gather, and hopefully the next time we have a happier story to share.
Yeah. Yeah. We hope
Well,
so.
you know what? Let me just say this. This is a happy story. Like I am so proud of our community and the way people have shown up, especially in a time where things are so awful, like things are really bad here in Chicago and Evanston, where I live, where people are being terrorized. And what I can say is the terrorism that's happening here and the terrorism that is happening with respect to Hamilton, people are standing up and meeting that challenge. And I'm so proud of us. And I just want to thank you all.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, again, thank you for everyone that could be here tonight. We're gonna, I'm gonna do what I can to get this recording, maybe a little bit of light editing, but get it out to the broader membership as soon as possible. And I'll be sharing it with the panelists so that they can get it out to whoever else needs to see it. So,
And thank you, Sarah.
yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Thank you for including me with this important work that you've been doing, and I'm so happy.
All right.
Does the chat get saved? Because I didn't get to read everything that people said. Will that be saved?
Yeah, I might I might need a reminder from somebody as to how to do that. But yes, that is the
Okay.
plan.
You have to save it before you end the session.
Yeah. So let's see.
Let's see. Oop, I just pressed something I wasn't supposed to.
Up at the top of the chat, there are the 3 dots.
Oh yeah, okay.
And then if you click that, it says save chat.
Thank you so much.
Thank you again, everyone.
All right.
Thank you all.
Happy Ways Goose. I hope everybody gets inky this weekend.
Yes.
Good plan.
All right.
Bye, everybody.
Y'all take care.
Bye. Thank you for joining us.